Am I the asshole for refusing to forgive my parents after they excluded me from the family for years? I'm 34 years old, and I've had a complicated relationship with my family since I was a teenager. I'm writing this because I honestly don't know if I'm being stubborn or if I'm justified in how I feel. To give some context, I grew up as the middle child in a very traditional family. My parents were strict, religious, and had clear expectations of how we were supposed to live our lives. My older brother, Alex, 36, and younger sister, Hannah, 31, fit into those expectations perfectly. They followed the rules, got good grades, went to church every Sunday, and basically did everything my parents wanted. I, on the other hand, was the problem child. When I was 15, I realized I was bisexual. This wasn't something I could openly share with my family because they were very vocal about their disapproval of anything that didn't fit their worldview. I kept it a secret for as long as I could, but when I was 17, my parents found out after reading my journal. They confronted me, and it was a disaster. They told me I was confused and going through a phase. My dad said I was living in sin, and my mom cried for weeks, saying she didn't know where she went wrong. Things got worse from there. They started monitoring everything I did, who I talked to, where I went, and even what I wore. They insisted I go to counseling at our church, where the pastor tried to guide me back to the right path. I hated every second of it, but I didn't have a choice. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. When I turned 18, I moved out as soon as I could. I got a part-time job, enrolled in community college, and lived with a friend until I could afford my own place. My parents barely spoke to me during this time. When they did, it was usually to guilt-trip me about how I was disappointing them or to lecture me about my lifestyle choices. My siblings didn't help much either. Alex kept his distance and said he didn't want to get involved, while Hannah sided with my parents and called me selfish for breaking up the family. Over the years, I built a life for myself. I worked hard, finished college, and eventually got a job I love. I met my partner, Megan, when I was 27, and we've been together ever since. She's amazing, kind, supportive, and everything I could have ever hoped for. My parents know about her, but they've never acknowledged her as my partner. They refer to her as my roommate and have made it clear that they don't approve of our relationship. For years, I tried to maintain some kind of relationship with my family. I would call, visit during holidays, and try to keep the peace, but it was always one-sided. They would make passive-aggressive comments about my life, ignore Megan completely, and act like I was some kind of black sheep. It was exhausting and hurtful, but I kept trying because I thought that's what family was supposed to do. Things came to a head 3 years ago when Alex got married. I was invited to the wedding, but Megan wasn't. When I asked why, my mom said it was because some people might feel uncomfortable. I told her that if Megan wasn't welcome, then I wouldn't come either. My mom said I was being dramatic and that I needed to put family first. I stood my ground and didn't go. After that, my parents stopped speaking to me altogether. Hannah blocked me on social media, and Alex sent me a long email about how I was being selfish and disrespectful. For the past 3 years, I've had no contact with my family. It hurt at first, but over time, I've come to accept it. Megan and I have built our own family with friends who love and support us, and I've finally started to feel at peace with myself. Then, out of the blue, my mom called me last month. She said she wanted to mend fences and asked if we could meet for coffee. I was hesitant but agreed because, deep down, I've always wanted to fix things with them. When we met, she apologized for the way she and my dad had treated me. She said they had been wrong and that they wanted to have a relationship with me again. I was skeptical but willing to hear her out. Then she dropped the real reason for her sudden change of heart. Hannah is pregnant with her first child, and they want me to be part of the baby's life. She said it was time to move on and put the past behind us. I told her I needed time to think about it, but the more I've thought about it, the angrier I've become. For years, they treated me like I didn't matter, and now they want to sweep everything under the rug because it's convenient for them. They've never apologized to Megan or acknowledged the pain they caused me. They just want to pretend like nothing happened and pick up where we left off. When I told Megan about the conversation, she said I had every right to feel the way I do. She supported me through everything, and she knows how much this has hurt me. But a part of me feels guilty. I know people can change, and maybe my parents really do want to make amends. But I also feel like they're only reaching out because they want something from me. I called my mom last week and told her I wasn't ready to reconcile. She got upset and said I was being unfair. She accused me of holding a grudge and said I was robbing my niece or nephew of a relationship with their aunt. My dad called me later and said I needed to grow up and stop being so selfish. Even Alex sent me a message saying I should be the bigger person and give them another chance. I don't know what to do. On one hand, I feel like I've spent my whole life trying to earn their love and approval, and I'm tired of being hurt. On the other hand, I don't want to regret not giving them another chance. Am I the asshole for refusing to forgive my parents after everything they've done? Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for my parents' retirement after they spent my college fund on my brother's wedding? Growing up, I always thought my parents were fair and treated me and my brother equally. I'm 33 now, and looking back, I realize I was either naive or in denial about how much favoritism they showed toward him. My brother, Ryan, is 3 years older than me and was always considered the golden child. He was the star athlete, the popular kid, the one everyone in the family fawned over. I was the quieter one who focused on school and didn't rock the boat. When I was a teenager, my parents started talking about college. They were very clear that they had a fund set aside for me, just like they did for Ryan. They said they wanted to give us the best start in life, and I was so grateful. College was a huge deal for me because I wanted to study engineering, and I knew it would be expensive. Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't interested in college. After high school, he bounced around for a bit, working odd jobs and trying to find himself. He eventually met his now wife, Claire, and they got engaged when he was 24. That's when everything started to fall apart. Ryan and Claire wanted a huge, elaborate wedding. I'm talking about the kind of wedding you'd see on a reality TV show, destination venue, designer dresses, a 5-tier cake, the works. They didn't have the money for it, but that didn't stop them from making plans. My parents, of course, wanted to help. They were so proud of Ryan and wanted his wedding to be perfect. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured they'd chip in a little to help out. I had no idea what was really happening until it was too late. The summer before my senior year of high school, my parents sat me down and told me that they had used most of my college fund to pay for Ryan's wedding. I was shocked. I asked them why they would do that, and they said they had no choice. Ryan needed their help, and they couldn't let him down. They told me they'd help me figure out a way to pay for college and that I could always take out loans. They said, "You're smart, you'll manage." I was devastated. I had worked so hard in school, and I felt like my future was being ripped away from me. I ended up applying for scholarships and financial aid like crazy. I got into a good engineering program, but I had to take on a significant amount of debt to make it work. Meanwhile, Ryan and Claire had their dream wedding, complete with a honeymoon in Hawaii. Over the years, my relationship with my parents became strained. They would occasionally bring up how proud they were of me for figuring it out and how I should be happy they gave me the tools to succeed. It felt like they were trying to justify what they did without ever acknowledging how unfair it was. Fast forward to now. I'm married, debt-free after years of hard work, and in a stable career. My wife and I are expecting our first child, and life is finally starting to feel good. My parents, however, are not doing so well. They're both in their 60s and recently retired. They didn't save much for retirement because they always assumed Ryan or I would help them out. Ryan, of course, isn't in a position to do so. He and Claire have 3 kids and are constantly struggling financially. He still hops from job to job and hasn't found anything stable. My parents recently approached me and asked if I could help support them financially. I told them no. I said that while I love them, I'm still recovering from the financial burden I had to take on because of their decision to use my college fund. I also reminded them that they've spent the past decade bailing Ryan out of his poor financial decisions, leaving me to fend for myself. They got defensive and said it was my duty as their child to take care of them in their old age. They said Ryan was doing his best, but just couldn't afford to help, so it was on me to step up. When I refused again, they accused me of being ungrateful and selfish. They said they sacrificed so much for me when I was younger, which is laughable considering they gutted my college fund for a party, and that I owed them for everything they did for me. I told them I didn't owe them anything and that they should have planned better for their retirement instead of relying on their kids to bail them out. Now, my parents aren't speaking to me, and Ryan has jumped into the mix, calling me a jerk for abandoning our parents when they need help. He said I was being cold-hearted and that family is supposed to stick together. I told him that maybe if he had been more responsible with his life, our parents wouldn't be in this mess. He didn't take that well and accused me of being jealous of him and his happy life. My wife is fully on my side and says I've done more than enough for my family. She thinks I need to focus on our baby and our future, not on fixing problems I didn't create. But part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. They are my parents, and I do feel bad about the situation they're in. At the same time, I can't forget how they treated me and how they prioritized Ryan's wants over my needs. So, am I the asshole for refusing to help my parents after they spent my college fund on my brother's wedding? Am I the asshole for walking out of my sister's wedding after a cruel joke during her speech? I'm a 29-year-old woman, and my older sister, Clara, who's 33, got married last weekend. Clara and I have always had a rocky relationship. Growing up, she was the golden child, popular, outgoing, and always the center of attention. I was the quiet, bookish one who often felt like an afterthought. Despite our differences, I always tried to support her and be a good sister. Clara's wedding was a huge event. She and her now husband are very social people, so the guest list was massive, filled with friends, extended family, and co-workers. I was a bridesmaid, something she insisted on even though we aren't particularly close. I agreed because I thought it might be a chance for us to bond and put some of our past issues behind us. For context, Clara has always had a knack for being cutting with her humor. She loves to make jokes at other people's expense and has a habit of taking things too far. I've been the target of her humor for years, but I usually brush it off to avoid conflict. I'll admit I've been sensitive about certain topics, particularly my career and love life. I work as a librarian, which Clara has always teased me about, calling me a glorified babysitter for books. I'm also single after getting out of a long-term relationship last year. Clara knows this is a sore spot for me, but she brings it up constantly, joking that I'm destined to be the crazy cat lady. I don't even have a cat. Anyway, the wedding day started off beautifully. The ceremony was gorgeous, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. During the reception, Clara gave a speech to thank everyone for coming. At first, it was sweet and heartfelt. She talked about how much she loved her husband, how grateful she was to everyone who helped with the wedding, and how excited she was to start this new chapter of her life. But then she turned her attention to me. She started with a joke about how surprised she was that I wasn't wearing a cardigan over my bridesmaid dress. Everyone laughed, and I forced a smile, even though it stung. Then she said something along the lines of, "I know we all thought OP might bring a date tonight, but let's be real. She's married to her library job." More laughter. At this point, I was already feeling humiliated, but she wasn't done. The final straw was when she said, "But seriously, OP, don't worry. One day, you'll find someone who loves you as much as you love those dusty old books. And hey, if not, there's always online dating." The crowd erupted in laughter, but I just sat there frozen. I could feel everyone staring at me, and I wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. I don't know what came over me, but I stood up, quietly grabbed my things, and walked out. I didn't make a scene or say anything. I just left. I texted Clara later to let her know I was leaving and didn't feel comfortable staying after her speech. She didn't respond, but my mom called me shortly after, furious. She said I embarrassed Clara and made the wedding all about me by walking out. She told me I was being overly sensitive and needed to learn how to take a joke. My dad, on the other hand, said he understood why I left and that Clara's comments were out of line. A few of my friends who were at the wedding also reached out to check on me and said they couldn't believe Clara would say those things in front of so many people. Still, the backlash from my mom and some other family members has me questioning if I overreacted. Clara hasn't reached out to apologize or explain herself, and I'm honestly not sure if I even want to hear from her. I feel guilty for leaving and potentially ruining her big day, but I also feel like I needed to stand up for myself. I've spent so many years letting Clara's comments slide, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Am I the asshole for walking out of my sister's wedding after her cruel jokes during her speech? Am I the asshole for refusing to financially support my family after they sold my childhood home to pay off my brother's debts? I'm a 34-year-old man, and I grew up in a middle-class family with my parents and younger brother, Jake, who is now 30. My parents worked hard to give us a stable upbringing, and while we weren't rich, we never lacked essentials. Our house was the center of our lives, a modest but cozy 3-bedroom home where all our best memories were made. I always imagined that house would stay in the family, maybe even be where my own kids would visit their grandparents someday. For most of my life, I worked hard to achieve stability. I wasn't naturally gifted, so I had to grind for everything. I put myself through college with scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans. I'm now in a stable career in tech, happily married to my wife, Hannah, with 2 kids. My life is far from perfect, but I'm proud of where I've gotten. My brother Jake, however, has had a very different journey. Jake has always been the charismatic one. He was popular in school, great at sports, and the life of every party. But he's also been reckless. He barely graduated high school, dropped out of college after 1 semester, and has been in and out of jobs for the last decade. He's tried his hand at multiple business ventures, each more questionable than the last. He's borrowed money from nearly everyone in the family, promising to pay it back, but never doing so. The final straw for me was when he asked me for $10,000 3 years ago to invest in a surefire cryptocurrency scheme. I refused, and he called me selfish and unsupportive. That was the last time I lent him money. Fast forward to last year. Jake got himself into serious financial trouble. He had racked up tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt, defaulted on a personal loan, and was being threatened with legal action. My parents, being the enablers they've always been, decided to step in. Without consulting me, they sold our childhood home to bail him out. When I found out, I was furious. I asked them why they would do something so drastic for someone who clearly had no intention of changing. My mom's response was, "We had to. He's our son, and he needed help." My dad added, "You're doing fine. You don't need the house, but Jake needed us." I couldn't believe it. That house wasn't just a building. It was the place where we grew up, the one constant in a world that often felt chaotic. I told them I thought it was a terrible decision and that Jake would just find himself in trouble again. But they brushed me off, saying I didn't understand because I'd never been in that kind of situation. They assured me Jake had finally learned his lesson and would turn his life around. Spoiler alert, he didn't. A few months ago, Jake got into another financial mess. He tried starting a landscaping business, but didn't bother with proper permits or insurance. When a client sued him over damages, he had no way to pay the settlement. My parents, now living in a small rental and with their savings nearly depleted, came to me for help. They asked if I could lend them $20,000 to cover Jake's latest fiasco and to help them stay afloat while they figured things out. I flat out refused. I told them that I had my own family to think about and that I wasn't going to pour money into Jake's bottomless pit of poor decisions. My mom started crying, saying they were desperate and had nowhere else to turn. My dad said I was turning my back on family and that Jake was still my brother no matter what. I reminded them that they chose to sell our home to save Jake once, and it didn't fix anything. I told them they needed to let him face the consequences of his actions instead of always rescuing him. Since then, things have been tense. My parents have called me selfish and cold-hearted, and Jake has been sending me angry texts, accusing me of being a fake brother who only cares about money. Even some extended family members have chimed in, saying I should help because family is family and I'm in the best financial position to do so. Hannah fully supports my decision and thinks my parents and Jake are manipulating me, but I'll admit the guilt is starting to eat at me. I hate the idea of my parents struggling, especially since they're getting older, but I also feel like I shouldn't have to clean up a mess I didn't make. Am I the asshole for refusing to financially support my family after they sold my childhood home to bail out my brother? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my sister move in after her husband kicked her out, despite having the space? I'm a 38-year-old man, married to my wife, Sarah, for the past 10 years. We have 2 kids, ages 8 and 6, and we live in a pretty big house. Sarah and I worked incredibly hard to get to where we are today. Both of us come from humble beginnings, and every dollar we've earned has been the result of hard work, long hours, and sacrifice. The story revolves around my younger sister, Amanda, who is 34. Amanda has always been the wild child of the family. Growing up, she was the one who broke curfew, partied all night, and got into trouble at school. Our parents bailed her out of every bad decision she made, which only reinforced her belief that there were no real consequences for her actions. I, on the other hand, was expected to be the responsible one. I studied hard, held part-time jobs, and stayed out of trouble. It was frustrating watching Amanda coast through life while I was constantly reminded of my responsibilities. Amanda married her husband, Dan, 6 years ago. He's a nice guy, very patient and hardworking, but I always wondered how he put up with Amanda's antics. She never worked a steady job, spent money recklessly, and often treated Dan like an ATM. Despite all this, Dan adored her and did everything he could to make her happy. A few weeks ago, I got a frantic call from Amanda. She was crying, saying Dan had kicked her out of their house after finding out she had drained their joint savings account to fund an impulsive shopping spree and a weekend trip with her friends. She admitted she had been hiding the extent of her spending from him for months, and when he found out, he lost it. Amanda begged me to let her move in with us, just for a little while until she could figure things out. This isn't the first time Amanda has found herself in a mess of her own making. In the past, I've loaned her money to cover rent, pay off credit card debt, and even fix her car. She's never paid me back, not even once. Each time, she promises it's the last time, but it never is. When she called this time, I hesitated. I told her I needed to discuss it with Sarah before making a decision. Sarah was immediately against the idea. She reminded me of all the times Amanda had taken advantage of my generosity and how it always ended in frustration and broken promises. She was also concerned about the impact Amanda might have on our kids. Amanda is loud, chaotic, and prone to dramatic outbursts, and Sarah didn't want that kind of energy in our home. I couldn't argue with her points, so I called Amanda back and told her we couldn't let her move in. Amanda exploded. She accused me of being selfish and heartless, saying I was abandoning her in her time of need. She claimed I was choosing my perfect little family over her and that I had always looked down on her for not being as successful as me. She even brought up our parents, saying they would have wanted me to help her if they were still alive. For context, our parents passed away a few years ago, and Amanda was their golden child. I don't doubt they would have guilted me into helping her if they were around. Since then, Amanda has been bad-mouthing me to anyone who will listen. She's called extended family members, mutual friends, and even posted on social media about how her own brother turned his back on her. Some family members have reached out to tell me I should let her stay, saying family is family and that I'm in a position to help. Others, who know Amanda better, have told me I did the right thing and that she needs to face the consequences of her actions. To make matters worse, Dan called me a few days ago. He apologized for involving me and said he's willing to work things out with Amanda if she's willing to go to counseling and stick to a budget. But Amanda refuses. She insists Dan is the problem and says she deserves better than to be controlled by a man who doesn't trust her. Dan sounded exhausted and defeated, and I honestly don't blame him. I feel torn. On one hand, I don't want to see my sister homeless. I know she's made a lot of mistakes, but she's still my sister, and part of me feels like I should help her. On the other hand, I have my own family to think about, and I don't want to disrupt the stability we've worked so hard to create. I also don't want to enable Amanda's behavior any more than I already have. If I let her move in, I'm afraid she'll never leave, and the cycle will just continue. Am I the asshole for refusing to let my sister move in, even though I have the space and the means to help her? Am I the asshole for refusing to pay for my parents' retirement after they gave my college fund to my brother? I am a 36-year-old woman with a stable job and a family of my own. My husband and I live comfortably, but we've worked hard to get where we are. Both of us came from modest backgrounds, and nothing was handed to us on a silver platter. I'm proud of the life we've built and the security we've provided for our 2 kids. This story begins about 18 years ago when I was in high school. I was a good student with excellent grades, and I had big dreams of going to college to become a doctor. My parents always told me they had a college fund set aside for me, and that I wouldn't have to worry about tuition. This gave me the freedom to focus on my studies without the looming stress of student loans. I worked hard, got into a great university, and was excited to start the next chapter of my life. But a few months before I was supposed to start college, my parents sat me down and told me they had used the majority of my college fund to bail out my older brother Tom. Tom is 3 years older than me and has always been the troublemaker of the family. He dropped out of college after his first semester and decided to start his own business. It was a terrible idea from the start. He had no experience, no business plan, and no concept of how to manage money. Predictably, his business failed within a year, leaving him with a mountain of debt. Instead of letting Tom face the consequences of his actions, my parents decided to pay off his debt using the money they had saved for my education. They explained this to me as if it was the most reasonable decision in the world. Tom needed help, they said. You're smart and resourceful. You'll figure something out. I was devastated. All my plans for the future felt like they were crumbling around me. I didn't even know where to start figuring it out, but my parents didn't seem to care. I ended up taking out student loans and working multiple part-time jobs to put myself through college. I had to give up my dream of going to medical school because I couldn't afford it, but I managed to get a degree in biology and later transitioned into a career in healthcare administration. It's not what I originally envisioned, but it's a stable job that I enjoy. Meanwhile, Tom continued to make one bad decision after another. He got into another failed business venture, then another. My parents kept bailing him out, using what little savings they had left. Every time I voiced my frustration, they would shut me down, saying, "Tom just needs more support," or "You wouldn't understand because you've always had it together." It was like they couldn't see that they were enabling him. Fast forward to today. My parents are both in their late 60s and recently retired. They've burned through most of their savings, partially because of their constant financial support for Tom, who is now 39 and still struggling to hold down a stable job. Last week, they called me and asked if I could start giving them a monthly allowance to help cover their living expenses. They also suggested that I could take them in if things got too tight. I was stunned. I reminded them of everything they had done to prioritize Tom over me throughout my life. I told them how their decision to use my college fund had forced me to start my adult life with debt, and how hard I had to work to build the life I have now. I also pointed out that they had made no effort to rein in Tom's reckless behavior, and that he should be the one stepping up to help them now. My parents got defensive. They accused me of holding a grudge, and said it was my duty as their daughter to take care of them in their old age. They also claimed that Tom wasn't in a position to help because he was still finding his footing, which is the same excuse they've been using for nearly 2 decades. When I asked why they thought I should bear the burden alone, they said it was because I was more capable and financially stable than Tom. The conversation ended with me telling them I wouldn't be giving them any money or taking them in. I told them they needed to figure things out on their own, and that maybe this was the wake-up call they needed to stop enabling Tom. They called me selfish and ungrateful, and now several family members have reached out to tell me I'm being cruel. Some of them have even offered to mediate, suggesting that I could at least contribute a small amount each month. On the other hand, my husband fully supports my decision. He's seen how much this dynamic has affected me over the years and believes my parents and Tom need to face the consequences of their actions. A few friends have also said I'm in the right, but others have suggested I could find a compromise to keep the peace. I feel conflicted. I don't want to see my parents struggle, but I also feel like they brought this on themselves. Am I the asshole for refusing to support them financially after everything they've done? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my parents live with me after they sided with my ex during our divorce? I'm a 40-year-old man, remarried, with 2 wonderful stepdaughters and a baby on the way. My life now is everything I've worked so hard to rebuild after the absolute disaster that was my first marriage. But now my parents have put me in a position where I feel like I'm being tested all over again. My first marriage was to Lisa. We met in college and got married when we were both 25. On the surface, we looked like the perfect couple, but behind the scenes, it was a nightmare. Lisa was controlling and manipulative. She managed to isolate me from most of my friends and always found ways to put me down. She'd criticize my career, saying I'd never amount to anything, and even mocked me for having hobbies she thought were childish. For years, I made excuses for her behavior, telling myself she was just under stress or that I needed to try harder to make her happy. The turning point came when I found out she was cheating on me with one of her coworkers. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. Instead, she blamed me for being boring and said the affair happened because I wasn't fulfilling her emotionally. That was the final straw. I filed for divorce, but the process was brutal. Lisa weaponized everything she could to drag me through the mud, including turning my own parents against me. My parents always adored Lisa. She was charming and always knew how to win people over. During our marriage, they'd often side with her during arguments, saying I was being too sensitive or that I should try harder to keep her happy. When I told them about her cheating and the divorce, I expected them to be furious on my behalf. Instead, they told me they didn't believe Lisa would ever do such a thing. They accused me of overreacting and said I was throwing away a good marriage over a misunderstanding. Things got worse during the divorce proceedings. Lisa started visiting my parents regularly, spinning her own version of events where I was the neglectful husband and she was the victim. My parents ate it up. They even testified on her behalf during the custody battle for our dog, which she ended up getting because of their statements. It was humiliating and devastating. I went no contact with them after the divorce was finalized. For the next few years, I focused on rebuilding my life. I went to therapy, worked on my career, and eventually met my current wife, Emma. She's everything Lisa wasn't: kind, supportive, and genuinely loving. She's been my rock through all of this, and her two daughters have brought so much joy into my life. We recently bought a house together, and with our baby on the way, it feels like everything is finally falling into place. A few months ago, I got a call out of the blue from my mom. She told me my dad had been forced into early retirement due to health issues, and they were struggling financially. Their savings were almost gone, and they were at risk of losing their house. She asked if they could move in with us temporarily until they got back on their feet. I didn't know what to say. It had been nearly a decade since I'd spoken to them. They hadn't reached out to me once in all that time, not even when I got remarried. Now they were asking for my help as if nothing had happened. I told her I needed time to think about it, but the more I thought, the angrier I got. During my divorce, they chose Lisa over me. They believed her lies, took her side, and actively worked against me. They had years to apologize or make amends, but they never did. Now they were in trouble and expected me to bail them out without any acknowledgement of what they'd done. I talked to Emma about it, and she was firmly against letting them move in. She said we didn't need that kind of stress or negativity in our lives, especially with a baby on the way. When I called my mom back and told her they couldn't move in, she started crying and begging. She said they had nowhere else to go and that I was being cruel by holding a grudge. My dad got on the phone and said I was being ungrateful for all the things they did for me growing up, like paying for college and helping me with my first car. I told them I appreciated those things, but it didn't erase how they treated me during one of the darkest times of my life. Since then, they've been trying to guilt-trip me through other family members. My aunt called me to say I was being heartless and that family should come first, no matter what. A cousin told me I should let them move in because it's the Christian thing to do. Even my mom posted a vague message on Facebook about children who abandon their parents, which led to a flood of judgmental comments from people who don't even know the full story. I feel conflicted. On one hand, they're my parents, and I don't want to see them homeless. On the other hand, they betrayed me when I needed them most and haven't shown any remorse for it. I've worked so hard to build a life free from the toxicity they represent, and I don't want to jeopardize that. Am I the asshole for refusing to let them move in? Am I the asshole for refusing to share my inheritance with my siblings after our parents will shock everyone? I'm a 35-year-old man, married, with a stable career and a decent life. My story involves my two younger siblings, Laura, 32, and Jake, 28, and our parents, who passed away unexpectedly in a car accident last year. It's been a hard year for all of us, but things have only gotten more complicated since the reading of their will. Our parents were middle-class, hardworking people. My dad was a teacher, and my mom worked as a nurse. They weren't rich by any stretch, but they were good with money and saved wisely. Growing up, we didn't have the newest gadgets or extravagant vacations, but we always had what we needed. They made it clear they were saving for their retirement and had a modest nest egg set aside. None of us ever thought much about it beyond that. After their deaths, we were all blindsided by what the will revealed. My parents left almost everything to me. I inherited their house, which is fully paid off, and 90% of their savings. Laura and Jake were left with only 5% of the savings each and a few sentimental items. It was shocking, to say the least. I sat there in disbelief as the lawyer read it out. Laura and Jake were visibly upset, and I couldn't blame them. I hadn't expected this. We weren't estranged, and as far as I knew, my parents loved all of us equally. After the initial shock wore off, I asked the lawyer if there was some mistake, but he confirmed that the will was clear and legally binding. My parents had even included a letter explaining their decision, which the lawyer gave me. The letter was difficult to read. In it, my parents said they believed I was the most responsible and financially stable of their children. They explained that they had seen Laura and Jake make poor financial decisions over the years and worried that leaving them large sums of money would only enable their behavior. They also said they trusted me to use the inheritance wisely and to help my siblings if they ever truly needed it. To give some context, Laura has struggled with money for years. She's constantly jumping from one job to the next and has racked up a lot of credit card debt. She's also been in and out of bad relationships, some of which have left her financially worse off. Jake, on the other hand, is more stable but has a history of making impulsive decisions. He once blew his entire savings on a failed business venture and is currently renting a luxury apartment he can barely afford. After the will was read, Laura and Jake confronted me. They were angry and hurt, accusing me of manipulating our parents into leaving me everything. I tried to explain that I had no idea about the will and that I was just as shocked as they were. But they didn't believe me. Laura said it wasn't fair that I got the house and the majority of the money while they were left with scraps. Jake demanded that I do the right thing and split the inheritance equally. I told him I needed time to think. This isn't a situation I ever imagined being in, and I wanted to make a fair decision. Over the next few weeks, I had countless sleepless nights trying to figure out what to do. On one hand, I understood their anger. It's not easy to be left with so little while your sibling gets the lion's share. On the other hand, I kept going back to my parents' letter and their wishes. After a lot of thought and discussions with my wife, I decided to honor my parents' decision. I told Laura and Jake that I wouldn't be splitting the inheritance equally, but that I would set aside a small portion of the money as an emergency fund for them. If they ever faced a serious crisis like a medical emergency or the loss of a job, I would use that fund to help them. However, I made it clear that this money wouldn't be a free-for-all and that I would need to see proof of the emergency before giving them anything. This didn't go over well. Laura called me selfish and greedy, accusing me of looking down on her. Jake said I was treating them like children and that our parents' reasoning was flawed. They both argued that family should come before money and that I was tearing our relationship apart by refusing to share. Since then, things have been tense. Laura has blocked me on social media and refuses to speak to me. Jake has been sending me passive-aggressive messages, occasionally escalating into outright demands for his share of the inheritance. Other family members have gotten involved, with some saying I should just split the money to keep the peace and others agreeing that I should follow my parents' wishes. My wife has been my biggest supporter through all of this. She reminds me that the money was left to me for a reason and that I shouldn't feel guilty for respecting my parents' decision. But I can't shake the feeling that I've destroyed my relationship with my siblings. I didn't ask for this situation, and I hate the idea that money has driven a wedge between us. Am I the asshole for refusing to split the inheritance with my siblings? Should I have ignored my parents' wishes to keep the family together? Or am I right to trust that they knew what they were doing when they wrote the will? Am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother move in with my family after he ruined my wedding? I'm a 34-year-old man, married to my amazing wife, Sarah, who's 32. We have 2 kids, and life is pretty great for us right now. However, my older brother, Nick, 36, has been a constant thorn in my side for as long as I can remember. This story goes back to our wedding 5 years ago and the fallout that's still affecting us today. Growing up, Nick was the golden child. He could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, while I was always held to impossibly high standards. Nick was charismatic and charming, but he always had a knack for stirring up trouble and finding ways to shift the blame onto someone else. He breezed through life with our parents covering for him whenever he screwed up. Meanwhile, I was left to fend for myself and clean up his messes when they inevitably affected me. When Sarah and I got engaged, I was over the moon. She's the love of my life, and I wanted everything about our wedding to be perfect. We planned a beautiful ceremony and reception, and I was genuinely excited to celebrate with our family and friends. Against my better judgment, I asked Nick to be my best man. Despite our rocky relationship, I wanted to give him the chance to step up and be supportive for once. It was a decision I would come to deeply regret. In the months leading up to the wedding, Nick was unreliable at best and downright sabotaging at worst. He missed tuxedo fittings, ignored my calls about bachelor party planning, and showed up late to our rehearsal dinner. But the real disaster happened on the day of the wedding. We had a strict no-alcohol policy before the ceremony because we didn't want anyone to show up drunk. Nick apparently thought this rule didn't apply to him. He showed up visibly intoxicated, slurring his words and reeking of booze. When I confronted him, he brushed me off, saying he just needed a little something to calm his nerves. Things only got worse during the ceremony. Nick stumbled through his best man duties, made inappropriate jokes during his speech, and even flirted with Sarah's maid of honor, who was clearly uncomfortable. The final straw was when he spilled red wine all over Sarah's dress during the reception. It was completely avoidable, and the look of devastation on her face broke my heart. I was furious. I pulled Nick aside and told him he needed to leave immediately. He tried to argue, saying it was just an accident and that I was overreacting. When I wouldn't budge, he stormed off and didn't even apologize. Sarah spent the rest of the night trying to keep a brave face, but I could see how upset she was. That was supposed to be one of the happiest days of our lives, and Nick had turned it into a circus. After the wedding, I went low contact with Nick. He never apologized for his behavior, instead claiming I was being too sensitive and needed to lighten up. Our parents, predictably, took his side. They said it was just Nick being Nick and that I shouldn't hold a grudge. They even suggested I was partly to blame for not managing him better on the day of the wedding, as if I were his babysitter. Over the years, my relationship with Nick has remained strained. He's continued to make bad decisions, jumping from job to job and burning bridges wherever he goes. Meanwhile, Sarah and I have built a stable, happy life together. We bought a house, had 2 wonderful kids, and worked hard to create the kind of family dynamic I never had growing up. A few months ago, Nick hit rock bottom. He lost his job, got evicted from his apartment, and has been couch surfing ever since. He called me last week, asking if he could move in with us for a little while until he gets back on his feet. He promised he'd stay out of the way and contribute to household expenses, but I know Nick too well to believe that. He's made similar promises in the past and never followed through. I told him no. I said I couldn't risk bringing his chaos into my home, especially with young kids to think about. He exploded, accusing me of being a bad brother and saying I was turning my back on family. He even brought up the wedding, claiming I was still punishing him for something that happened years ago. I told him that while the wedding was part of it, this was about his overall pattern of behavior and the fact that I don't trust him to respect our boundaries. Now my parents are furious with me. They've been calling and texting nonstop, saying I need to help Nick because he's family and has nowhere else to go. They've even offered to mediate and come up with rules for him to follow while he stays with us. I told them it wasn't happening and that they were welcome to take him in if they were so concerned, but they said their house is too small and they can't afford it. Sarah is 100% on my side. She said our priority has to be our kids and our own peace of mind, and she doesn't want Nick anywhere near our home. I agree with her, but the guilt is starting to eat away at me. Part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh, especially with how much pressure my parents are putting on me. I've always been the responsible one in the family, and it feels like they expect me to clean up Nick's messes because no one else will. So, am I the asshole for refusing to let my brother move in, even though he's in a tough spot? Or am I right to prioritize my family and protect our home from the chaos Nick inevitably brings? Am I the asshole for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after I found out her fiancé cheated on her? I, 29M, have a younger sister, Kate, 26F, who has always been a huge part of my life. We grew up very close, sharing everything from toys to secrets. We had our fair share of sibling squabbles, but overall, I've always thought of her as one of my closest friends. I've always tried to support her in every way possible, even through the ups and downs in her life. So, when she got engaged to a guy named Tom, who seemed to check all the boxes on paper, I was happy for her. Tom and Kate had been dating for about 2 years before he proposed. As far as I knew, they were the perfect couple. He was charming, kind, and he made Kate incredibly happy. My parents loved him, and I never saw any red flags. However, everything changed when I was invited to go out for drinks with a mutual friend of mine and Tom's, Jake. Jake and I have been friends since high school, but we don't hang out as much anymore because we're both busy with work and life. But we still keep in touch and occasionally catch up. That night, Jake seemed off. He was unusually nervous, and it took me a while to get him to open up, but once he did, I was floored by what he told me. Jake revealed that Tom had cheated on Kate multiple times over the course of their relationship, including right before he proposed to her. He admitted that Tom had been seeing another woman for several months, someone Kate didn't know about, and that Tom had confided in Jake about it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had no idea why Jake was telling me this, but it was clear that he was struggling with whether or not he should tell Kate. Apparently, he had asked Tom to come clean to her, but Tom had refused and begged him to keep quiet. I was furious. I couldn't understand why Tom would do something like this, and even more, I couldn't believe that Jake had kept it a secret for so long. But my bigger concern was Kate. She had no idea that the person she was about to marry had been lying to her for months. After thinking about it, I realized that I couldn't sit by and let this happen without saying something. I went home that night, and after talking with my wife, I decided I needed to tell Kate the truth. But I also knew it would be devastating. I didn't want to be the one to break her heart, but I felt it was the right thing to do. I called Kate the next morning, asking if we could meet up in person. I didn't tell her why, I just said I had something important to discuss. When we met, I sat down with her and told her everything I knew about Tom. I explained how Jake had told me about Tom's infidelity, and how I couldn't keep this information to myself. Kate was speechless at first. She just stared at me, and then her face crumpled into tears. I tried to comfort her, but she was in shock. She asked me why I hadn't told her sooner, and I told her that I only found out recently and needed time to process the information myself. She was devastated, and I could tell she was torn between anger and heartbreak. She kept asking if I was sure, and I told her that Jake had no reason to lie, and that Tom had been hiding it for months. Kate said she would confront Tom immediately, and I knew this was going to be a tough conversation for her. After I left her place, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, but I was also worried about how things would unfold for her. The next few days were chaotic. Kate confronted Tom, and he initially denied everything, but once she had all the facts, he admitted to the cheating. I don't know all the details of their conversation, but Kate ended the relationship shortly after. She called me, crying, but also sounding more determined than I had ever heard her before. She thanked me for telling her the truth and said that she needed time to heal. I assumed that would be the end of it, but things didn't go quite as I expected. A week later, Kate reached out to me with news that Tom had been begging for her to take him back. She told me that she had decided to give him another chance and that they were going to work through their issues. I was shocked and a little angry. I couldn't understand why she would take him back after everything he had done. But, of course, I didn't want to push her away or make her feel like I was judging her. At that point, I made a decision. I told Kate that I wouldn't be attending her wedding if she chose to marry Tom. I felt like it was my responsibility to stand by my principles and that I couldn't support her decision if she was choosing to marry someone who had treated her so badly. I told her that I loved her, but I couldn't watch her make such a mistake. Kate was heartbroken. She told me that I was making it about me and not about her, and that if I loved her, I would support her no matter what. She accused me of being controlling and said I was putting conditions on our relationship. She also mentioned that she felt like I was punishing her for not doing what I wanted. I tried to explain that I wasn't trying to control her, but I felt like I had to stand by my morals, and that if I was supporting her, I would be condoning what Tom did. She told me that I was being selfish, and that I should trust her to make her own decisions. I told her that I trusted her, but I didn't trust Tom, and that I couldn't support a marriage built on such a broken foundation. Since then, things have been tense between us. Kate hasn't spoken to me much, and she hasn't invited me to the wedding yet, which I assume means she's still with Tom. My parents have been pressuring me to make up with Kate, saying that family is more important than any relationship, and that I shouldn't let something like this come between us. So, am I the asshole for refusing to attend my sister's wedding if she goes back to a man who cheated on her? Should I just put my feelings aside and support her, even though I think she's making a huge mistake? Or am I right to stand my ground and refuse to condone her marrying someone who has betrayed her? Am I the asshole for telling my sister that she shouldn't have invited our mother to her wedding after she didn't invite me? I, 30 am the oldest of 3 siblings. I have 2 younger sisters, Emma, 27F, and Lily, 24F. My relationship with my sisters has always been a bit complicated, especially with Emma, but I always thought we had a solid bond, even if we didn't always see eye to eye. Recently, things have gotten worse, and I'm not sure if I'm in the wrong or if I'm just standing up for myself. To give you a bit of background, my mother and I have a very strained relationship. I'll try to keep it brief, but basically, our whole family dynamic has been unhealthy for as long as I can remember. My mom and I never got along growing up, and when I was in my teens, things got so bad that I moved out at 16 and went no contact with her for a few years. It wasn't just normal mother-son problems. It was emotional abuse, manipulation, and constant criticism. My mom also had a history of prioritizing my siblings over me, and I often felt like the black sheep. Eventually, we worked through some things when I was in my 20s, but our relationship has never been great. I keep my distance, and I keep the interaction polite but cold. I don't hate her, but I certainly don't feel like we're close. Emma and Lily, on the other hand, have always had a much closer relationship with our mom. Emma was always the golden child in our family and always seemed to get the validation and attention from both our parents. Lily, being the youngest, also had a softer spot in my mom's heart, but not to the extent of Emma. I never envied them for this, but I did feel left out a lot growing up. So, fast forward to last year, when Emma got engaged to her fiancé, Jacob. Emma had always dreamed of a big, extravagant wedding, and she started planning it as soon as she got engaged. She started sending out invitations and planning everything down to the smallest detail. I was excited for her, and I was happy to be included in the wedding. However, about a month before the wedding, I received a call from Emma, and that's when everything went south. She told me that I was not going to be invited to her wedding anymore. She said that it was due to family drama and that she couldn't have me and Mom in the same space for such an important day. She said that after thinking about it, she didn't feel comfortable having me there because she didn't want to deal with the tension between me and Mom. I was absolutely floored. We had talked about the wedding multiple times, and at no point did she indicate that I might not be invited. I asked her if she was seriously telling me that I wasn't going to be invited because of our mother, and she said yes. I asked her why she didn't just invite both of us separately if that was the case, and she said that wouldn't work. She didn't want to cause any drama or make anyone uncomfortable. This stung a lot. I had been nothing but supportive of Emma's relationship with Jacob, and I had been excited to celebrate her big day. I understand that family dynamics can be tricky, but this felt like a personal betrayal. Emma and I had always had a somewhat rocky relationship, but I never expected her to completely exclude me from something as significant as her wedding just because of our mother. I tried to explain to her how hurtful this was, and I told her that I didn't expect her to pick sides between me and our mother, but it felt like she was choosing to enable our mother's behavior. I said that I had made the decision to keep my distance from her, but I was willing to attend the wedding in a civil manner. I wouldn't have caused any trouble, but it felt like Emma didn't even want to try to make things work. She didn't really seem to care much about my feelings, and her response was essentially that it was her wedding, and she didn't want to deal with the drama. A week later, I found out that Emma had invited our mother to the wedding. This felt like the ultimate slap in the face. It made me feel like I wasn't just being excluded from her wedding, but like I was being replaced. I didn't understand why our mom, who I'd distanced myself from for years due to her emotional abuse, was being welcomed with open arms while I was being shut out. I felt like I was being punished for setting boundaries with our mom, and that Emma was choosing to enable toxic family behavior rather than supporting me as her brother. This situation became more complicated when my parents found out I wasn't invited. My dad reached out to me and said he didn't understand why I wasn't going to be at Emma's wedding. I explained the situation to him, and he was sympathetic, but he didn't take my side. He told me that Emma's wedding was a special day and that I should let bygones be bygones for the sake of family. But I didn't feel like I should just forget the way Emma had treated me or pretend everything was fine just to attend her wedding. I wasn't going to put myself in a situation where I was expected to play nice with people who had hurt me. I decided that I wasn't going to go to the wedding, and I made it clear to Emma that I wouldn't be attending. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable celebrating her wedding when I had been excluded for something as trivial as our mother's presence. I told her that it wasn't just about not being invited. It was about the fact that she had made the decision to cater to our mother's feelings over mine. I told her that I wasn't going to be a part of a family event where I was being made to feel like an outsider. The conversation ended on bad terms, and Emma hasn't spoken to me much since. I feel like I've lost a lot of my family in the process, especially with my parents pushing me to move on and forgive Emma for the sake of family unity. But I still can't get over the fact that Emma would prioritize our mom's feelings over mine, especially when I've tried so hard to keep my distance from her for my own well-being. Now, with the wedding over, I'm left wondering if I made the right choice. I feel like Emma should have understood where I was coming from, and that she should have tried harder to make space for me at her wedding, despite the tension between me and Mom. I'm not sure if I was being unreasonable for refusing to go, but it's hard to shake the feeling that I've been completely disregarded. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to go to my sister's wedding after she invited our mother but didn't invite me? Should I have just let go of my resentment and gone to show support? Or am I justified in standing my ground? AITA for making my friend choose between her wedding and my mental health? So I, 29F, have a friend Sarah, 30F, who's been my best friend for years. We've been through everything together: breakups, family drama, college stress, and even starting our first jobs. We've always had a tight-knit bond, and I thought that would last forever. That is, until Sarah announced her engagement and started planning her wedding. To give some context, I have a history of mental health issues. I've struggled with anxiety and depression for most of my adult life. It's something I've been working on through therapy, medication, and personal growth. But it's a constant battle, and I know when I'm at my breaking point. Lately, with everything going on in my life, I've been feeling especially overwhelmed. It's like I'm walking a tightrope every day, trying to balance work, family, friendships, and my own self-care. When Sarah got engaged, I was thrilled for her. Of course, she's one of the most important people in my life. But from the very beginning of the wedding planning process, I started to feel the stress building. At first, it was the usual wedding stuff: dress shopping, venue hunting, dealing with relatives, etc. But then the requests started coming in. Can you help me choose my wedding colors? Can you plan the bachelorette party? Can you give me feedback on my seating chart? It seemed like every time we spoke, it was all about the wedding. Don't get me wrong, I was happy to be there for her, but I could feel myself getting more and more drained. Fast forward a few months to when the wedding day was fast approaching. Sarah had asked me to be a bridesmaid, and I said yes because I didn't want to disappoint her. But the pressure kept building. Sarah was one of those brides who wanted everything to be perfect, and she leaned heavily on me to make that happen. I found myself doing things like going with her to appointments, picking up last-minute items, helping with DIY decorations, and even trying to calm her down when she would get stressed. The problem is, the more I did, the worse my anxiety got. I was staying up late to finish work while simultaneously managing her wedding tasks. I stopped seeing my therapist as often because I was too busy, and all of this culminated in a full-blown panic attack a couple of weeks ago. I had to cancel a big meeting at work because of it. I was shaking, couldn't breathe properly, and felt completely overwhelmed. I knew I had to do something, or I was going to burn out completely. So, after I calmed down, I sent Sarah a message. I told her that I loved her and I wanted to be there for her, but I couldn't keep up with the wedding demands. I told her that if she needed me to keep being a bridesmaid and continue all the wedding-related work, I wasn't sure I could do it without completely ruining my mental health. I suggested that maybe I could still be there for her in other ways, but I couldn't continue the way things were going. Sarah did not take this well. She called me in tears, telling me that I was ruining her special day. She said I was being selfish and that a real friend would support her through everything. She accused me of being unsupportive and not prioritizing our friendship. She said that I was acting like her wedding was a burden to me, when all she wanted was to have me by her side. She also mentioned that I'd been part of her bridal vision from the very beginning, and now I was backing out. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her at all, but rather about my own limitations, but she couldn't understand. At this point, I was feeling guilty and frustrated. I didn't want to let her down, but I also couldn't keep sacrificing my own well-being. I needed to take care of myself before I completely cracked. A couple of days later, I ended up calling her again and asking if we could have a calm conversation. She agreed, but the discussion didn't go any better. She told me that I had to choose between her and my mental health, because I couldn't have both. She said that if I truly cared about her, I would make her wedding a priority, and if I wasn't willing to do that, I wasn't being a real friend. I was left feeling torn. On one hand, I didn't want to lose Sarah's friendship. She was and still is one of the most important people in my life. But on the other hand, I can't keep sacrificing my own health for the sake of her wedding. It's not like I don't want to be there for her. If it was just about showing up for the ceremony and the reception, I would be fine. But the sheer amount of emotional and physical energy she needed from me was too much. Since then, Sarah has barely spoken to me. She's been venting to our mutual friends about how I'm ruining her wedding, and some of them have started to distance themselves from me too. I feel terrible, but I also feel like I'm being forced into a position where I have to choose between my well-being and my friendship. I don't know if I'm being unreasonable for setting these boundaries, but I also don't want to lose Sarah over this. So, Reddit, AITA for choosing my mental health over my friend's wedding demands? Should I have just sucked it up and done what she asked? Or am I right to set these limits and prioritize my well-being? TLDR, my best friend asked me to do a lot for her wedding, and it started to negatively affect my mental health. I told her I couldn't keep up with the demands, and she accused me of being selfish. Now our friendship is on the rocks, and I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong for prioritizing my own mental health over her wedding. AIDA for refusing to help my sister with her wedding after she lied about her finances. I, 26F, have a sister, Megan, 29F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. We were never really close growing up. I'm the more responsible, practical one, while she's always been the more carefree, impulsive type. I'm not saying that in a bad way, but it's just how we've always been. Our parents have always had a bit of a favoritism toward her, which has led to some tension between us, especially since I was often the one doing more to help around the house, take care of the little things, and get the academic achievements, while Megan got more attention and praise for her social life and free-spirited nature. Despite that, we have a cordial relationship now that we're both adults, and we've worked through most of our issues. But things took a turn when Megan got engaged to her fiancé, Tom, 32M. They've been together for a little over a year now, and their engagement was pretty sudden. I mean, they've always been the type of couple to rush into things, and this was no different. At first, I was excited for her, but I started to get concerned when she mentioned how much she was spending on the wedding. Now, I'm not a wedding planner, and I know everyone has their own ideas of what a wedding should be. But Megan's dream wedding seemed excessive. She was talking about a venue that was way out of our family's budget, designer dresses, a massive guest list, and expensive catering. She started asking me to help her with the planning, especially with managing her budget, because, as she put it, I'm the organized one. I agreed to help her out, knowing how much she's relied on me in the past to get things done, and I didn't mind helping her as long as she was being reasonable about her expectations. Fast forward a couple of months, and things started getting worse. Megan was constantly asking for more money, asking for me to help her with this or that. And when I would question how she could afford it, she'd either make excuses or tell me that Tom's got it covered and everything will work out. However, there was always an underlying tension whenever I asked her to be realistic about her budget. One day, I found out through my mom that Megan had been asking our parents for money to cover the costs, but the way she was asking made it seem like she didn't have a solid plan. Our parents were getting worried because they've been tight on money recently. My dad's business has been struggling, and my mom has had health issues that are getting expensive. So I decided to confront Megan about it. And that's when things started to get ugly. I asked her point blank what her actual budget was and how she planned to make everything work. She got defensive, saying, "Why are you questioning me? I'm doing this for my big day, and I want it to be perfect." I told her that I wasn't trying to ruin her happiness, but I just wanted to make sure she wasn't putting herself into debt or relying too much on others. That's when she dropped the bombshell. She told me that Tom didn't actually have the money for all of this. In fact, she confessed that she had been lying about their finances and that Tom was in significant debt. She said she'd been hiding it from everyone because she didn't want to be judged. She didn't want to admit that they couldn't afford the wedding, but instead of having an honest conversation about it, she was trying to fake it until they could make it. I was floored. I could not believe what I was hearing. Megan had been telling everyone that Tom was financially stable, that they were fine, and that everything was covered. I asked her why she hadn't been honest with me from the start, especially since I'd been helping her plan the wedding, and she just kept saying that she didn't want to disappoint anyone. She said she felt like she was in too deep and didn't know how to pull back. I told her I was really disappointed in her. I told her that if she was willing to lie about something this important, then how could I trust her judgment when it came to the wedding? I also told her that I wasn't comfortable helping her further if she wasn't going to be upfront about her situation. She started to cry, saying I didn't understand how much this wedding meant to her, and I tried to tell her that I understood, but that she needed to be more realistic about it. We ended up having a huge argument, and she hung up on me. The next few days were a mess. Megan didn't reach out to apologize, and I didn't feel like I could just forget the conversation. I started talking to my parents about it, and my mom, in particular, was really upset with me. She said I was being too harsh on Megan, that I didn't understand how much pressure she was under, and that she was just trying to have a nice wedding. My dad, on the other hand, agreed with me to some extent, but was still frustrated by how much Megan had put them in an uncomfortable position. Eventually, Megan reached out to me again, asking me if I could still help her with the wedding. She said she was going to cut back on some things, but she still wanted me involved. I told her that I couldn't help her unless she came clean about everything. I said if she was truly going to be honest with everyone about the finances and had a clear plan moving forward, then I'd be more than happy to help. But if she was just going to keep pretending that everything was fine, then I wasn't going to be part of it. She got really upset again, saying I was trying to control her wedding and that I didn't understand how hard it was for her to balance everything. She said I was being unsupportive and that if I really cared about her, I'd help her no matter what. I tried to explain that I was just concerned about her well-being and that I didn't want to see her make a huge mistake, but she didn't seem to want to hear it. So here I am, feeling like I'm in the wrong, but also standing my ground. I'm just trying to look out for her, but I also don't want to enable her to make poor financial decisions. I feel guilty because she's my sister, and I want to be there for her, but I also feel like I've already given her so many chances to be honest, and she keeps lying to me. AITA for refusing to help my sister with her wedding after she lied about her finances. AITA for confronting my friend about how she treated my partner at my birthday party. I, 28F, have a close friend, Emily, 27F, who I've known for about 10 years. We met in college and have stayed friends through thick and thin. While we're very different people, she's more outgoing and spontaneous, and I'm quieter and more reserved. We've always managed to balance each other out and maintain a strong friendship. I thought that we understood each other, but recently, things have gotten complicated, and I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or if I have a right to be upset. My partner, Liam, 30M, and I have been together for almost 2 years now. He's everything I've ever wanted in a partner. Kind, supportive, and respectful. He and Emily get along, but I've noticed that Emily isn't always the most comfortable around him. She tends to act differently when he's around, sometimes dismissive, and occasionally makes snarky remarks. I've brushed it off, thinking maybe she just wasn't as close to him yet, and maybe she just didn't know how to act around him. But recently, things have started to feel a bit off between the two of them. For my birthday this year, I decided to throw a party and invite all of my closest friends. I've never been the type to make a big deal out of my birthday, but I wanted to celebrate with the people I care about. I made sure to invite Emily and Liam, as I wanted all of my important people to be there. The party was at my apartment, and I worked hard to make it fun, good food, a playlist of all our favorite songs, and a relaxed vibe. I was excited for everyone to have a good time and for the night to go smoothly. As the night went on, everything seemed to be going well at first. People were chatting, laughing, and having fun. But as the night wore on, I started to notice something that made me uncomfortable. Emily, who had been drinking for a while, seemed to be making more pointed remarks towards Liam. She would make sarcastic comments about things he said or how he was acting, and I could see that Liam was getting visibly uncomfortable. He's not the type to engage in conflict, so he would usually just smile awkwardly or laugh it off, trying to avoid any tension. But I could tell he wasn't enjoying himself. At one point, Liam and I were talking about a trip we're planning for later this year, and Emily came over and said, "I don't know why you're going on all these trips. Are you really that insecure that you need to get away from your own home?" The way she said it was so pointed, and I could see Liam tense up. He's usually pretty easygoing, but I could tell that comment really bothered him. I tried to brush it off, but it didn't sit right with me. I thought maybe she was just drunk and not thinking about what she was saying. Later on in the evening, Liam and I were sitting on the couch together when Emily came over again. She was a little more tipsy at this point, and she plopped down next to us without asking. She leaned in close to Liam and said, "You know, it must be nice to have someone take care of you all the time. I bet you don't have to do much, huh?" The comment was so condescending, and I could tell that it hurt Liam. He didn't say anything, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. At this point, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I pulled Emily aside, away from the group, and asked her what was going on. I said, "Emily, I've noticed you've been making some comments towards Liam tonight that I don't think are very fair. He's my partner, and I don't appreciate you treating him like that." She looked surprised for a moment, and then she started defending herself, saying, "I wasn't trying to make him uncomfortable. I'm just having fun. Why are you taking it so seriously?" She seemed to brush it off like it was nothing, and that frustrated me even more. I told her that it wasn't just fun and that if she had an issue with Liam, she needed to address it in a more respectful way instead of passive-aggressively making jabs. She looked at me like I was overreacting, but I stood firm. She then said, "I don't know why you're so sensitive. It's not like he's a saint either. I've seen how he acts, and I'm just pointing out things that are obvious." I was taken aback. What did she mean by that? I asked her to explain, and she just shrugged and said, "You're too caught up in defending him to see the flaws. Maybe you should focus on yourself more than on him." At that moment, I felt like I was being blindsided. Emily had always been a little outspoken, but this felt different. I wasn't sure what had changed, but I realized that this wasn't just a fun comment anymore. She had been making jabs at Liam for a while, and I was starting to feel like she was undermining our relationship. I told Emily that I didn't want her to continue making comments like that. I said, "If you're going to treat Liam like this, maybe you need to reconsider whether or not you should be coming around when we're together." She looked shocked and defensive. She said, "Wow, so you're actually going to choose him over me now?" I didn't say anything immediately, but I felt my frustration building. I wasn't choosing anyone over anyone, but I was not going to let her disrespect my partner in my own home, especially not on my birthday. The rest of the night was awkward. Emily seemed upset, and she spent the rest of the evening sulking in the corner with a few other people who had noticed the tension. Liam and I decided to leave early, and I made sure to check in with him on the way home, apologizing for how the night had gone. He reassured me that he was fine, but I could tell he was still a little hurt by Emily's behavior. The next day, I texted Emily to let her know that I was upset about what had happened. I told her that I was hurt by the way she treated Liam, and that if she had issues with him, she needed to be upfront and have a real conversation instead of making passive-aggressive remarks. She responded by saying that I was being dramatic and that I shouldn't let one night ruin our friendship. She claimed that I was defending Liam over her, and that she felt like I was pushing her away. I didn't respond to her right away, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't sure what I should do. Emily's comments were hurtful, and I felt like I had every right to stand up for Liam, but I didn't want to lose my friendship over it either. It feels like she's unwilling to admit that she did anything wrong, and I'm starting to feel like this situation has changed the dynamic between us. So, AITA for confronting my friend about the way she treated my partner at my birthday party? Should I have let it go? Or was I right to stand up for Liam? AITA for refusing to let my cousin's son stay with me after his behavior in my house. I, 30F, have always been very close to my extended family. Growing up, I spent a lot of time with my cousins, aunts, and uncles, and we've always had a strong bond. Over the years, we've all gotten older, and some of us have moved away or started families of our own. I've always tried to stay in touch with everyone, and I enjoy having family gatherings when we can make it happen. One of my cousins, Rachel, 34F, has a son, Ethan, 15M, who I've known since he was a baby. He's a good kid. At least he was when he was younger. Lately, however, I've noticed some behavioral changes in him. He's become increasingly rude, entitled, and disrespectful to his parents, and I've heard from family members that he's been acting out a lot recently. Rachel has tried to address his behavior, but it seems like she's been struggling to handle him, and their relationship has become strained. A few weeks ago, Rachel asked if Ethan could stay with me for a couple of weeks during the summer. She explained that she and her husband were going on a family vacation, and they needed someone to watch him while they were away. I've always been happy to host family members, and I thought it would be a nice opportunity to spend some quality time with Ethan. I don't have kids of my own, so I've never really had to deal with teenage behavior on a day-to-day basis, but I figured it would be fine. After all, he's family, and I wanted to help out. At first, everything seemed fine. Ethan arrived at my apartment, and we had a nice first evening. We ordered takeout, watched a movie, and chatted. However, it didn't take long for things to start going downhill. The next day, Ethan began making comments about how boring my apartment was compared to his. He mentioned how small my place was, how ugly the furniture looked, and how he couldn't believe that I didn't have the latest gadgets like his parents. I tried to shrug it off, telling myself that maybe he was just trying to adjust to being away from home. Things only got worse from there. Ethan started staying up late on his phone, refusing to turn it off when I asked him to, and I had to remind him several times that it was a rule in my house to limit screen time at night. He would ignore my requests and continue to play loud videos or scroll through social media. When I confronted him about it, he snapped back, saying, "Why do you care? It's not like I'm bothering anyone." I tried to explain that it was just common courtesy, but he was dismissive and rolled his eyes at me. Over the next few days, I noticed more signs of disrespect. Ethan would leave his dishes all over the house, never cleaning up after himself. He would eat my snacks without asking, and when I confronted him, he told me, "It's not like you were going to eat it anyway." I found his attitude increasingly frustrating, but I didn't want to overreact. I tried to be patient, thinking maybe he was just adjusting to being away from home or acting out because his parents weren't around. However, things took a more serious turn when he threw a tantrum over something small. We had plans to go to a local park for a walk, and when I suggested we leave in an hour, Ethan insisted he wasn't ready yet. I told him we could leave in 30 minutes, but when the time came, he was still sitting on the couch, ignoring me. I asked him again, and he said, "I don't feel like going anymore. You can just go by yourself." I was irritated by his lack of respect, but I tried to stay calm. I told him that if we were going to go, he needed to be ready at the agreed time. When he refused again, I told him that we would just stay home. That's when he completely lost it. He started yelling at me, saying I was being controlling and that I had no right to tell him what to do. He called me pathetic and accused me of trying to ruin his fun. I was taken aback by his reaction, especially considering how minor the situation was. I tried to talk to him about how his behavior was inappropriate and how I expected him to be respectful, but he didn't listen. Instead, he stormed off to his room and slammed the door. I was left standing there, feeling completely disrespected. At that point, I was beyond frustrated. I had tried to be understanding, but his behavior was becoming unbearable. I called Rachel to let her know what had happened, explaining that Ethan was being extremely difficult and disrespectful. I told her that I didn't feel comfortable continuing to have him stay with me if he couldn't treat me with respect. Rachel was shocked and apologized, but she didn't seem to fully understand how serious the situation was. She told me, "He's going through a phase. Please just give him time to adjust." I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I was starting to feel like I was being taken advantage of. I didn't want to play the role of the bad guy, but I didn't think it was fair for me to tolerate Ethan's disrespect in my own home. So, I made the difficult decision to tell Rachel that I couldn't continue to have Ethan stay with me. I explained that his behavior was making it impossible for me to feel comfortable in my own space, and I felt like I was being disrespected. I told her that I didn't want to cause any drama, but I needed to prioritize my own well-being. Rachel was upset, and she asked me to reconsider. She said that she had already paid for the vacation, and she didn't want to cancel her plans because of Ethan's behavior. She told me that I should be more patient with him and that it was just a phase. She even accused me of being too sensitive and not giving him enough of a chance. I stuck to my decision and told her that I couldn't keep Ethan at my place if he wasn't going to respect me. Rachel ended up finding a last-minute solution for Ethan, and he stayed with one of her friends for the remainder of the vacation. While I didn't want to cause any friction, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done the right thing for myself. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. I know that I shouldn't have to tolerate disrespect in my own home, but I also feel bad for Rachel. She's dealing with a lot with Ethan, and I don't want to make things harder for her. I feel like I'm caught between wanting to be a good family member and standing up for myself. So, AITA for refusing to let my cousin's son stay with me after his behavior? Should I have been more patient? Or did I make the right call by setting boundaries? AITA for kicking my best friend out of my wedding after she disrespected my mother in front of everyone? I, 28F, am getting married to my fiancée, 30M, in a couple of months. We've been together for 4 years, and I'm really excited for the big day. Weddings can be stressful, and while we've been trying to keep things low-key, there's always a lot to manage: planning, finances, and family dynamics. Speaking of family dynamics, that's where things got complicated. I've been best friends with Clara, 29F, for over a decade. We met in college and became fast friends. She's like a sister to me, and we've supported each other through everything, from breakups to family issues to career struggles. She was even my maid of honor when I was in a relationship before my fiancé. I thought that nothing could come between us, but I'm starting to wonder if that's true anymore. Clara has always had a complicated relationship with my mother, 50SF. My mom and Clara have never been the closest, mostly because Clara is very independent and a bit rebellious, whereas my mom is more traditional and likes to control things. Over the years, they've had their disagreements, but I've always done my best to balance both of them. I love them both dearly, but I admit that sometimes my mom can be overbearing. However, I've always tried to maintain peace and support Clara when it comes to my mom. Leading up to the wedding, there was some tension between Clara and my mom. Clara has been pretty vocal about how she feels that my mom is trying to take over the wedding. My mom, being my mom, has been very involved in the planning. She's offered to help with the decorations, the guest list, and even the catering. While I appreciate her efforts, she can be a bit much, and Clara has been getting frustrated. I've told Clara to try to be patient and that I'll manage the situation, but it's clear that Clara feels like my mom is imposing her ideas on us. The day before the wedding, we had a rehearsal dinner at a nice restaurant, and that's where everything went south. The dinner was meant to be a relaxed evening where our closest friends and family could get together before the big day. My mom had helped organize it, and she was really proud of the venue and the arrangements. Clara had agreed to come, but I could tell she wasn't too thrilled. She showed up late and immediately seemed tense. Everything was going fine until my mom made a comment about Clara's dress. Clara had chosen a stunning dress for the event, but it was a little more casual than what my mom had expected. My mom, in her typical way, made a remark about how the dress was a bit too informal for a rehearsal dinner and that a little more effort would have been appreciated. It was an offhand comment, but it made Clara visibly uncomfortable. Clara tried to laugh it off and made a joke about how she didn't want to outshine the bride, but you could tell she wasn't happy. I could feel the tension building, but I thought that maybe it was just a misunderstanding. However, things took a sharp turn when my mom suggested that Clara could have dressed a little more appropriately for the occasion. Clara, who was already upset by the previous comments, snapped back with, "Maybe if your standards weren't so ridiculous, I'd actually feel comfortable dressing the way I want to." It was clear from the tone that Clara wasn't backing down. My mom, who tends to be sensitive to criticism, took offense immediately and said, "If you can't handle a little criticism, maybe you shouldn't be part of this family in the first place." The entire room went silent. Everyone was staring at the two of them. I could see the tension between them rising, and I felt myself getting more and more uncomfortable. I tried to step in and change the subject, but Clara wasn't done. She said, "Maybe if your idea of a perfect wedding wasn't so suffocating, I wouldn't feel the need to make remarks about it." My mom, who had been trying to hold it together, snapped back, "This wedding isn't about you, Clara. It's about my daughter, and I'm doing everything I can to make it perfect." At this point, I could see that there was no saving the situation. Clara, now visibly upset, stood up and said, "If I'm not wanted here, I'll just leave. Clearly, I'm just a burden on everyone." She grabbed her things and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the rest of the group in stunned silence. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. On one hand, I understood Clara's frustration with my mom's controlling nature, But on the other hand, I felt like Clara had gone too far. My mom was hurt, and I could tell that she was genuinely upset. I apologized to my mom, tried to calm her down, and explained that it wasn't personal, but she was having none of it. She said that Clara had disrespected her in front of everyone, and she didn't feel like she could tolerate that behavior anymore. I tried calling Clara several times after the dinner, but she didn't pick up. Eventually, I sent her a text asking if we could talk. She replied a few hours later, saying that she felt completely disrespected by my mom and that she was done being around that kind of negativity. She said that she wasn't going to be a part of my wedding if it meant dealing with my mom's overbearing nature. I was heartbroken. Clara had been such an important part of my life, and I couldn't believe this was happening the day before my wedding. The morning of the wedding, I was a mess. I didn't know if I should reach out to Clara again, but I also knew that I couldn't let her ruin the day for me. I decided to focus on the wedding and not let the drama get in the way. But as the ceremony was about to begin, I received a call from Clara. She told me that she wasn't coming to the wedding. She said she didn't feel welcome and that she couldn't be part of something that was so toxic. I was devastated. I begged her to reconsider, but she was firm in her decision. I hung up the phone and found myself in tears. I wanted to respect Clara's feelings, but I also didn't think I could go through with the wedding without her. She was my best friend, and she had been a part of so many significant moments in my life. After the wedding, I talked to a few friends about what had happened. Some agreed that Clara had been out of line and that she should have tried harder to understand my mom's perspective. Others said that my mom had pushed Clara too far and that I should have stood up for Clara instead of letting my mom's behavior slide. I've since tried to reach out to Clara and apologize for not intervening sooner, but she hasn't responded. I've been feeling guilty, and I don't know if I did the right thing. I don't want to lose my best friend, but I also don't want to keep trying to fix things when I feel like I was caught between two people I love. So, AITA for kicking my best friend out of my wedding after she disrespected my mom in front of everyone? Could I have handled things differently? Or did I do the right thing by not tolerating her behavior? AITA for kicking my sister out of my house after she kept making passive-aggressive comments about my parenting? I, 35F, have a 5-year-old son, Liam, and a 2-year-old daughter, Emma. My husband and I have worked really hard to create a stable, loving home for them. Parenting has been a journey, and as with any new parents, we've made our fair share of mistakes, but we try to do the best we can for our kids. A little background. I have one sister, Becca, 32F, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. She never really seemed interested in settling down or having kids. She's always been independent, always out and about, and enjoying life without many responsibilities. Growing up, Becca was the life of the party and always encouraged me to go out and enjoy life. Our relationship has been pretty good overall, though we've had our disagreements in the past, mostly because we're just different people with different life choices. Recently, Becca came to stay with us for a few weeks after her apartment flooded. She was in the middle of finding a new place and needed somewhere to crash temporarily. I didn't hesitate to offer her a room because, well, she's family. My husband was on board, even though he knew it might be a little tricky, given how different Becca's lifestyle is from ours. Things started off okay. Becca seemed excited to spend time with the kids, and I was hopeful that it would be a good opportunity for her to bond with them. But almost immediately, things took a turn. Becca started making little comments here and there about how we were raising Liam and Emma, and they were starting to really get under my skin. At first, I tried to brush it off. She made a comment one morning while I was making breakfast about how I was so strict with Liam because I wouldn't let him have candy before breakfast. You know, he's going to have a complex about food if you keep being so strict, she said with a little laugh, like it was no big deal. I just smiled and told her that I was doing what was best for him, and I'd rather he didn't start his day with sugar. But the comments didn't stop. Over the next few days, I heard about how we were too overprotective because we don't let the kids play outside without supervision. She said we were sheltering them too much and that we should let them have more independence. She went on and on about how kids need to experience the world and how we shouldn't be so controlling. I started to feel a little irritated. I've always done my best to keep Liam and Emma safe and to provide them with the best environment to grow. I don't think I'm too strict, but I definitely want to set boundaries and teach them responsibility at an appropriate age. So when Becca started to comment on how I was smothering them, I began to feel like she wasn't respecting my choices as a parent. One evening, I was getting the kids ready for bed, and Becca came into the room to chat. She started talking about how she didn't understand why I was so focused on schedules and routines. She said, "Kids are kids. They don't need a rigid routine. You should let them be free and do what they want. You're making them so structured that they'll never learn how to think for themselves." I was getting really frustrated at this point. I told her that I was doing what worked for us and that a routine helped both Liam and Emma feel secure. Becca laughed and said, "Well, I guess we're all just doing the best we can, but I wouldn't be so strict. Let them live a little." She made it sound like I was depriving them of their childhood by having them follow a bedtime routine and regular meal times. The thing is, I know Becca isn't a parent, and she hasn't had to deal with the daily struggles of raising young kids. She's always been able to pick up and go wherever she wants, while I'm tied to my home with 2 young children, trying to create stability and teach them good habits. I understand that she doesn't have the same responsibilities, but it felt like she was implying that my way of parenting wasn't good enough. She's always been very vocal about how she doesn't want kids of her own, and while I respect her choice, it doesn't give her the right to criticize how I choose to raise mine. The final straw came one afternoon when I was in the middle of making dinner, and Becca decided to pop in and help. She started making comments about how I was ruining Liam's appetite by not giving him more variety with his meals. "You really should let him try different foods, not just the same old stuff every day," she said. "He's probably bored of chicken nuggets by now. Now, I get that Liam is a picky eater, but I've tried introducing new foods, and he just doesn't like them. I can't force him to eat what he doesn't want, and I'm doing my best to make sure he's getting the nutrition he needs." When I gently explained that Liam had his preferences and we were working on broadening his diet, Becca snapped, "Well, that's your problem. You're letting him dictate what he eats instead of being the parent. Kids will never grow if they don't try new things." She went on for a while, but I had reached my limit. I told Becca that I needed her to stop criticizing me and that I appreciated her input, but I was the one responsible for raising my children. I explained that I was doing what I felt was best for them, and she wasn't going to change that by making passive-aggressive comments all the time. She looked taken aback and said, "I'm just trying to help. If you can't handle a little advice, maybe you're the one with the problem." I ended up asking her to leave, which I know sounds harsh, but I was honestly at my breaking point. I told her that if she couldn't respect my parenting choices, she wasn't welcome to stay in my home anymore. I explained that it was creating a toxic environment for me and the kids, and I needed space to focus on our family without the constant criticism. She was shocked and angry, but I stood firm in my decision. Becca left that evening, and I haven't heard from her much since. A few family members reached out to ask what happened, and I explained the situation as politely as I could, but I've been feeling guilty ever since. On one hand, I feel like I have every right to ask her to leave if she can't respect my parenting and the boundaries I've set in my home. But on the other hand, I wonder if I overreacted. Now, my family is divided. Some people think I did the right thing by standing up for myself and protecting my children from unnecessary criticism. Others think I should have just let it go and that I was too harsh on Becca. I'm honestly not sure if I handled this correctly. So, AITA for kicking my sister out of my house after she kept making passive-aggressive comments about my parenting? Should I have been more patient with her? Or was I right to draw the line?